Welcome back, and this week we're going to be looking at mitosis and meiosis and basically cell division. We've talked about DNA and how that codes for all the different genes and how an organism is coded to sort of grow up. Now we're going to start talking about how the cells replicate and divide so that we can have all the cells we need to actually build the organism and it can grow. So cell division is basically what happens when the cells divide up to make more copies of themselves. Okay, so if we think about it, all of us began as a single cell. When two gametes came together, they formed a zygote. Okay, so a zygote is essentially a fertilized set of sex cells. Okay, so the egg and the sperm come together, we get a zygote. And then as that zygote grows, the number of cells in the body increases, dividing over and over again until we get enough cells to make tissues and tissues to make organs and systems, as you've learnt about previously. Okay, so now every one of us is made up of billions and billions of cells, but our body cells need to continue to divide throughout our life to help repair and grow other aspects of like our skin and things like that. Okay, so we have millions of skin cells lining our intestines, bone cells, all the different types of cells inside our body need to be able to replicate and divide themselves up so that if we get cut, if we get hurt, or there's disease, we have these new cells to be able to repair that damage. If our cells weren't dividing like this, we wouldn't be able to reproduce and we wouldn't grow as individuals. So there's two types of cell division that we're going to look at. Okay, remembering that cell division is when a parent cell divides into daughter cells. So we get new cells from the old cell. Mitosis, okay, which is the first one, and this produces two daughter cells. Okay, so if we have a parent cell, when it divides, we get two daughter cells. And these are identical to the parent cell. They're the same as the parent cell. Okay, so they will have the same number of chromosomes, they have the same DNA, and that's basically because these are used for growth and repair. And if we want to repair our skin cells, we want all our new skin cells to be exactly the same as the skin cell that we were repairing. We don't want them to be different, we want them to still be the same, and the body makes them the same. Meiosis, on the other hand, produces gametes, and if you remember from last week, gametes are our sex cells, so these are eggs and sperm, and if you remember, that means that they have a haploid number of chromosomes, or half the number of chromosomes of the parent cell. And this is because when we have reproduction occurring, we want two gametes to come together to form a cell, a new cell that has the full number of chromosomes, but half from the maternal line or the mother and half from the paternal line or the father. So mitosis is all about growth and repair, keeping the cells the same. Okay, and then meiosis is all about producing gametes to make new organisms. So these are different. Okay, we're not having growth and repair here, we're trying to make a new organism. Let's have a look at them in detail. In mitosis, okay, this is something that's happening continuously through our body, but we've discovered, or scientists have discovered, that it occurs in stages throughout the process. Okay, so when the cell is not actively dividing, it's replicating its DNA, and then once it's replicated its DNA, this is when we can actually see individual chromosomes. The cells begin to divide, okay, and then the chromosomes become visible. So what we need to do is know what each of these stages is, but in year 10 we just need to be able to sort of put them in order according to what's happening in images of what the process is. If you're doing 1-2 bio, you will actually come to learn what the names of each of these phases are and do them in more detail. But for year 10 science, we're just going to sort of do an introduction to it. So the first stage of mitosis is we have the parent cell. Okay, in this cell, the chromosomes start to replicate, and become all double-stranded. So this spaghetti-like thing in here is just the amount of DNA inside that cell doubling. Once it's been replicated and we now have twice the amount of DNA, the double-stranded chromosomes become visible, and this is the only time our chromosomes actually look like these big X's, is when the DNA has been replicated and we actually have double-stranded chromosomes. Once this happens, after this happens, and they're all tightly coiled up into the chromosomes, and we've got the chromatids in the middle, the centromeres between our chromatids, they actually line up along the equator, or the middle point of the cell. Okay, so all the chromosomes line up, and they have these fine networks on them that we call spindles. These attach to the chromosomes at the centromere and each end of the cell. Then slowly these get pulled each way, and when they pull, they actually take half of each of these X's with them. Okay, so given that this is 2 times the normal amount of DNA, when this splits up, we get a normal diploid number of chromosomes in each half. And then the new cell membrane forms, and we end up with 2 daughter cells that are the same as the parent. Okay, so because we doubled the DNA at the start here, when we divide it in 2, we end up with a normal 2n amount of DNA. Okay. So this is it in more detail. As I said, if you're doing Unit 1-2 Bio, you'll come to learn these stages. But essentially, the chromosomes duplicate, the chromosomes then condense and become visible. They line up along the equator, and then the spindles pull them to either side, which is this one here. Okay, so we can see them being split in half. Then new nuclear membranes, they sort of push in here, they form, and we end up with 2 daughter cells. Okay, so 2 daughter cells is critical, and they both have a 2n complement of chromosomes. Okay, so they are diploid. They have 23 pairs. Okay, so they are diploid with a total of 46 chromosomes after mitosis. This is mitosis. Okay, so after we've got mitosis, this is what happens. So we've already talked about the fact that we have 46 chromosomes, half from your father and half from your mother, and that we call this the diploid number, 2n. In our gametes or our sex cells, okay, we have half that number. We have the haploid number. Okay, so in our sex chromosomes, we only have a haploid number, and this is our XX and XY chromosomes. Okay, this determines if we are female, XX, or male, XY, according to the sex of our chromosomes. So these are autosomes in our body cells. So these ones will undergo mitosis. Okay, because the autosomes are our body cells, and this is where we want a diploid number of chromosomes, of the homologous chromosomes. Okay, so these ones have the same length and have the centromere in the middle. Okay, which means that on these homologous chromosomes, remembering that the different alleles or different forms of the gene are in the same location. Okay, so and then in our gametes, which are our sex cells, we have the haploid number. So if we look at a homologous pair of chromosomes, remembering that they're not identical, one from the maternal side, one from the paternal side, they are the same size and the same length, and they encode for the same genes, but they don't necessarily have exactly the same forms of the same gene. So you could have a homologous pair of chromosomes and both of them would code the gene for curly hair, but one might code the gene for curly hair and one might code the gene for straight hair. And then depending on which gene is dominant, that would be the one that you would have. So the genes in the different loci, okay, so each locus, loci being plural of that codes for the same trait, but they may be different forms. So now that we've got all that sorted, we know that we've got our body cells, our autosomes undergo mitosis for growth and repair, giving us 2 daughter cells. We need to look at the cell process that gives us daughter cells for gametes. Okay, so meiosis is the cell division that produces gametes, so it produces sex cells, which we know this means that the chromosomes, we need to end up with a haploid number of chromosomes rather than diploid, because we want 2 sex cells to come together to form a complete organism. So now, same thing as before, our DNA will have duplicated. Our chromosomes condense and become visible. The pairs of double-stranded chromosomes line up, okay, and then division happens again. So this section here, the first few stages are very similar to that of mitosis, okay. But then it undergoes a second set of divisions. One of these cells, or each of these cells now, they will line up again. Okay, so the double-stranded chromosomes line up again. So at this point, we've got a diploid number. They line up again, the spindles form, and then they're pulled apart again. So the chromatids separate and they move to the separate sides or the separate poles of the cell. This means when division is complete, we end up with a haploid number because we've divided the diploid again. Okay, so we've got a haploid number and we end up with 4 daughter cells. So meiosis gives us 4 daughter cells that will have a haploid number of chromosomes compared to the parent, and these are sex cells only. Oops. So they're sex cells only. Okay, so these are for reproduction of the organism, not for growth and repair. So meiosis is when we're generating sex cells, mitosis for growth and repair. There's a couple of animations here and we'll look at these in class, but you're welcome to have a look at them yourself. You can get the live links from the PowerPoint in our class OneNote. So that's it for this. Make sure you've got your notes and I'll see you in class.